This podcast was produced from a webinar. For a more interactive experience with visuals, visit advancedmanufacturing.org/webinars.
Hello and welcome to an SME Media webinar. I'm Amy Bryson, contributing lead editor with SME Media. Today's presentation focuses on winning with fewer people, higher costs, and no margin for error. And our presentation today is brought to you by CADDi. Now it's my pleasure to turn things over to Aaron and the CADDi team. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who's hopping on to join us today. I really appreciate all the help that SME has given us in putting together this webinar, but also putting together the market research report that we're going to be referencing, expanding on the housekeeping. We're going to be sharing in follow-up for everybody, both a recording of the webinar and links to all of the material that we're talking about today. We've got a lot of interesting stuff to get into, and my hope is that we'll be able to touch all of it, although the research report itself is pretty meaty. So if you do have questions by the end of it that we don't have a chance to get to, just know if you put those in Q&A, we'll certainly get to them in follow-up. I also just want to take a second before we dive in and call out a couple of folks who I see having joined us. Not your first rodeo. Philip, great to see you online. Also, Brian Kruger, thanks for joining us. I know this isn't your first rodeo. What I think I'd like to do right now is take a couple of minutes and maybe introduce us for anyone who's not familiar. My name is Aaron Lober. I'm the VP of Marketing for CADDi here in the US. And I brought with me my VP of Engineering, Chris Cope, and my VP of Partnerships, Patrick Harrigan, both who are almost certainly going to say smarter and more insightful things about manufacturing than I am today. But before we get too far into it, guys, I wonder if I can get you to each do sort of a brief introduction for yourselves. Maybe, Chris, if I throw to you first.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Aaron. Chris Cope, VP Engineering at CADDi. I guess I've spent 20 years doing AI products, software, everything under the sun. Especially, I've been in the manufacturing AI space for about 7 years, and so very familiar with manufacturing problems and helping manufacturers to source faster, respond to RFQs faster, just kind of be more competitive. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, Chris. Hey, guys. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Patrick Harrigan. As Aaron alluded, I lead our indirect channels here at CADDi. So if anyone's interested in partnerships, please don't hesitate to reach out. Whole career in manufacturing software. So I've been around the space quite a bit on several different sides of the house, on engineering design to quality to operations and production and so on and so forth. So excited to talk to you all about some of the challenges we're seeing. And I think Aaron has a really good run of show for us today. You're on mute, Aaron.
I certainly hope so. And any excuse to get off of this headshot slide, which reminds me, we're just like a tribe of burly white dudes. No, okay, jokes aside. As I said a moment ago, today we're going to go through the results from our 2026 Manufacturing Outlook Survey. It's quite possible, actually, that some of you on this call participated in this year's survey. So to anyone that did, thank you so much, if that's the case. This is actually the second year in a row that we've run this survey. So we're going to do some show and tell. We're also going to dive in a little bit to try to discuss some of the trends that have popped up across years. So this is the preamble portion. Once I get through that, we'll actually step into a discussion and try to get under the hood on some of these things. But first, to create a little more context around what we actually did here, we collected data from about 230, little over actually, 230 manufacturing leaders from the senior manager level all the way up to the C-suite. We did that with the help of our partners at SME. So again, to the SME folks, thank you so much. But we took a cross section of basically all of American manufacturing. So every major vertical is represented here, from heavy machinery to packaging equipment to small fabricators and everything in between. We really focused on identifying themes that were felt across verticals and segments, so we could basically present the clearest picture possible of what you were all anticipating out of 2026. And it might surprise some of you first to think about 2025 as a year of expansion, given all of the anxiety that many of us had rolling into last year. But despite all of that fear and uncertainty, many of us felt around Liberation Day, at least last year, 2025 was a period of relatively strong investment for most manufacturers. So growing CapEx, in some cases, expanding headcounts. In some ways, the expectations of, I think, a slightly more dovish Fed, also some tailwinds in terms of trade policy that favored maybe local manufacturing, opened the door to some of you making what were relatively big bets that would help you, I imagine, harvest some of the increased demand for your products. 2026 has a decidedly different tone to it. So across the board, our respondents in the survey for this year are much more focused this year, that is, on operational efficiency. I think it's likely that these trends are actually kind of related. The chips, so to speak, have been pushed into the center of the table, if you will, and now folks are looking for ways to sort of improve their odds. We got a lot of responses this year from people who were adopting more data-driven approaches to improving ROI from their existing projects or workflows. We also got a lot of folks indicating that 2026 would be a year where they doubled down on things that were already working while trimming fat elsewhere, so to speak, rather than making big investments in new initiatives. So 2026, if I wanted to characterize it in some way, I would call it a year of increased discipline from many of your perspectives. Now, the other side of the coin, there remain headwinds. Those headwinds for 2026 actually look a lot like what folks were anticipating rolling into 2025. Of course, looking at this makes one kind of wonder how similar these 2 years are going to be at the end of the day in terms of how they play out, especially as it relates to trade policy. But costs are rising thanks to increased material inputs as well as labor costs. Potential conflict with China or other regional partners certainly doesn't help and raises some concerns of supply chain disruptions. The skilled labor shortage is still with us, so I'll say a little more about that in a second, but 79% of our respondents said this was really their biggest challenge. And finally, wild swings in trade policy coming out of the Trump administration are making planning and compliance incredibly difficult for folks, especially those of you who are working in sectors that have relied on nearshoring or operating just over the border with Mexico or Canada to finish more complex assemblies. I said I'd say a little more about skilled labor. I do want to zoom in there for a second. This is a problem that seems to be accelerating, right? The lack of available labor is already hurting 7 out of 10 businesses, right? That's pretty staggering that's the place where we are today. When we asked this last year, by the way, 7 out of 10 respondents shared the same theme, basically, that this issue of skilled labor was their greatest external threat. This year, it's 8 out of 10. So this is an accelerating problem. It's one that's already seriously felt, and it's here, but we didn't do enough to address it in 2025. Of course, It's a difficult thing to address. This is a societal problem that's probably complicated by several decades worth of globalization. So it's not going to be easy to reverse this trend. Something, however, that really came through this year is that it's not just the shop floor that feels that labor deficit. Increasingly, operations, design, and engineering are all finding it much more difficult to recruit and retain staff. So this is a really negative development for any senior leaders who have been making big bets on factory floor automation, thinking that that alone will offset some of the pain they're experiencing related to the labor shortage. It also signals something, I think, really ominous about our labor force's belief in the viability of what we historically think of as higher paid, more specialized roles over the next 10 years. I think especially over the last several months, those in traditionally white collar jobs are starting to question, the safety long term of their work. The response from most of you to this, I think, actually is a good one, albeit maybe it's a partial solution. Most folks are trying to find ways to maximize the people that they do have access to. So hire well, train people effectively, retain them basically at all costs. There is maybe the first of several shameless plugs here for CADDi. We've spent the last year basically working with a growing number of companies like Shibuya Hotman, Milwaukee Tool, Toyota Gosei, etc., who are all using CADDi Drawer specifically first as a system for injecting historical data and context into the workflows being run by their whole team, but importantly in this context, their newer employees, to help them get up to speed quickly. Not the only thing we do, but it certainly is a big benefit for the people who are adopting CADDi. We won't be going into, by the way, any of our more complex custom solutions today on this call. At least I don't anticipate it. However, if you are interested in seeing sort of the breadth of what we can bring to the table in terms of enabling workflows for your company, then make sure you just reply to our thank you email after the fact, and we'll be sure to get in touch and share that material. Let's see. Getting off of the shameless plug and back into the flow of what we're here to talk about. A lot of that demand I just mentioned, we believe is coming from manufacturers' recognition that, this type of historical data injected into their workflows at the right place, right time. So, or smarter use of parts data is sort of emerging as one of the most practical tools that manufacturers have for easing the impact of that labor shortage. Major reductions in unplanned downtime, improved production yield, fairly significant reductions in direct procurement cost. Honestly, the list of areas where people are getting value from being data first, so to speak, is pretty long and growing. I mean, we could get further into like lead time optimization, improved win rates, more efficient working capital. As I said, I'm not going to touch all of the areas where taking a data first strategy is going to help your business, but in a year of ROI focus, having a data first approach is just good strategy. And I think we're seeing that reflected in a lot of the data that we've collected here. That is sort of the perfect dovetail over into the AI of it all. Our survey said a lot about the state of AI adoption. The big takeaways really is that nearly everyone, has already embraced some level of investment in AI, even if that's as simple and straightforward as turning to an LLM. Most of you have already discovered actually areas where deployment wasn't as effective or impactful as you had hoped. Practical applications, applications focused on operations that are trying to create human efficiency, those seem to be working, at least those that aren't too ambitious, but we still clearly have a long way to go. In terms of specific use cases that many of you said you envision for this coming year, Applications in digital engineering seem to be top of mind for folks. So enabling more effective design, more effective, CAD CAM workflows, documentation automation, even CAD drawing generation to a degree. Also, a lot of folks have discussed needed investments in IT and data infrastructure. So this is more of a facilitating conversation for being able to deploy your data and leverage AI more effectively, but adoption of data lakes, then using the information contained in there fed through AI to develop effective analytics to run the business, maybe even taking a step into also building AI agents on top of these type of smarter, more well put together data sets. Um, these are really heavy impact initiatives, obviously, and it's a great time to be tackling them if the focus for this year is to improve ROI of your existing initiatives. And also in terms of what's already in flight, a lot of folks have surfaced up a number of practical operations driven use cases, quality monitoring and optimization, basic admin and upskilling of folks. I really like the quality and inspection speed and accuracy angle. That's one that we're talking to an increasing number of customers about. The constraints, though, are real, right? So we can't have this conversation without acknowledging there are some real risks. Cybersecurity and data quality concerns were top of mind for folks in our survey here. I can't tell you how many horror stories I've now listened to about ChatGPT hallucinating something that hurt the manufacturing process, or about proprietary data being uploaded into a public LLM. It's a great way to find yourself out of a job. I don't want to totally gloss over this last point. AI is framed as a response to the labor shortage, yes, and increasing cost pressures, definitely. The thought process is if you can't hire enough skilled labor, then maybe invest in AI and automation, and that can drive efficiencies for you. I think there's actually a lot of value in this thought process, and demonstrating that point, we sort of honed in on this finding. Here's what I think actually is the really smart justification for specific forms of AI adoption. The average employee today at a manufacturing operation is spending 1 hour every single day just searching for parts data. This is true across design, engineering, procurement, even sales. That's basically 12.5% of an individual's time on any given workday. This really goes back to my earlier point about how AI can enable an organization to offset some of the lack of skilled labor. If we can take this search time functionally to zero, that's a potential 12% uplift in productivity for your entire team. And that compounds pretty quickly for folks. Of course, this is really, the power of having a data first strategy, but most teams are going to need better tools, better approaches to make it a reality. This is probably last and final shameless plug for CADDi here. It's nearly impossible to do a cross-functional enablement of broad teams leveraging a bunch of leveraging a bunch of siloed systems that contain your historical records. I'm going to let Chris and Patrick say more ultimately about the technical side of how we can enable this, because I want to get us into discussion. But this is a really important point. So I'm gonna end here before we get into really talking about this stuff. I want to put a capstone on some of this, right? So 2026, it's a year of ROI, not just growth. Skilled labor is a growing challenge that's getting in the way of that ROI and candidly of our growth. But there are some surmountable efficiency gaps that we can overcome, and we can start to offset the impact of that labor gap. So maybe the last thing to say is, because this is my whole preamble, just a reminder, we're going to be sharing this material. The full market research report is going to be linked in here, but you can also find it on our website at us.caddi.com. So with all of that being said, I think I want to turn Patrick probably to you first. And then Chris, I'll come to you second here too. I want to touch the frame of the conversation first. So, 2026 is being framed as a year of discipline. So where do manufacturers go to get sort of the fastest measurable ROI right now? Is that engineering, procurement, quality operations? Like where do they focus and why? And maybe Patrick, I'll throw that to you first before going back over this.
Yeah, it's obviously very different needs for multiple departments, right? So depending on which department you're representing, looking at some of the folks we have on the call, I see some folks certainly from engineering, from process engineering, from manufacturing engineering, also some folks from sales and procurement. So maybe I'll talk in broad strokes and give some specific examples. I think, when we talk about the concept of ROI, ROI becomes more challenging. So let's break that down, like return on investment. Your investment becomes a lot more challenging to get a return on the higher that upfront investment ultimately is. And so I often use an analogy where when my family goes on vacation, we rent an Airbnb and we go to the grocery store and we buy a bunch of food for the week. And come the last day of vacation, we have like a clean out the fridge night. So we're not going to be able to take this food home with us. And so we might as well get creative on how to mix and match whatever we have left in the fridge. And, when drawing that back to an ROI discussion, it's a fairly low investment for me on that last night, right? It's already food that it's a sunk cost ultimately that we've already purchased. And you're certainly not producing a Michelin star meal, but it's a decent meal and it's a low investment. And in that context, it's like, okay, I think I would consider this to be successful, right? The idea being, like, if you were to apply that same concept to our internal processes and internal operations, what do we have sitting around? And unfortunately, we don't have a bunch of engineers sitting in a refrigerator somewhere that we can tap on. But the idea being, if we can't bring on additional headcount, we can't go and procure big capital equipment. What do we have? What do we have available that we can get creative with to try to derive value from? And we have institutional knowledge. So we have guys and girls who've been there for 20, 30, 40 years, who've solved very similar challenges and problems to what we're currently facing. And that to me is one of the most under-tapped and underutilized resources that we can look at. So that's high level hypothetical. How do we lower our risk for any sort of project or investment? And I often encourage people to turn internal and start there. Now, if you want to talk specifically on ROI elements that different departments are looking for, on the procurement side, cost down initiatives are incredibly important right now. Everyone's looking for negotiating levers with their existing supplier base. So being able to leverage this institutional knowledge throughout your supply teams and your procurement teams so that you can have more negotiating power is one thing that we see pretty often. And it doesn't take a huge upfront investment to help surface some of that insight and bring some of that insight to light. Similar type of concept, but maybe like with a little bit of an engineering spin, is design reuse. So how do we take because the reality is the majority of us who are in manufacturing, we're building very similar things over and over again. I mean, not all the time are we creating a whole new product category or parts category or subassemblies or what have you. And so we've likely solved some of these problems or built very similar things throughout the past. And so how do we reuse some of that experience around design, and can we reuse some of these designs so we don't have to start from scratch and reinvent the wheel? And then certainly same concepts apply all through operations and maintenance. And hey, when we go to manufacture this product, Steve, who's been here for 30 years, knows all the tricks to run this specific machine or asset. How do we begin to socialize those tricks with our newer employees so that we can use our most valuable and experienced resources on other areas and get our new workforce up and trained much quicker and make them more effective? So there's a lot to unpack there, but hopefully that makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah, this is it's interesting to listen to you go through this, because I get the benefit of also having internal conversations with you all the time where we're talking about sort of the proverbial hydra, or like beast with many heads, that is the ROI story that an AI empowered data platform that is generic to the full capital Ed manufacturing or capital S supply chain organization can present. Do we start that conversation talking about lead time optimization, or do we talk about revenue growth related to win rates, or is it a cost optimization conversation? It's really dependent on which departments within the organization we're speaking to. And that looks very different when it's a process engineer who's trying to move faster towards production readiness by pulling forward all of their historical documentation than if we are speaking with somebody, say, on the procurement side of the house. So Chris, can I throw that question to you as well? I'm really interested.
Yeah, I've recently talked to 3 of our customers in the last probably 2 weeks, and so maybe I'm grounded in this recent conversation. But if you want to save money, or if you want to help the company today, create an internal award for who reuses the most designs this month, right? Like employee of the month, but like who reuses the most designs. We help people across all, everything from sales to, design to procurement. But I think the best decision, that's the most impactful decision that someone can make, is reusing a design, right? So somewhere between sales and engineering, when somebody says, "Oh, we have a part that we can just use for this new project," we have millions of designs. Maybe I've never heard of this design, but I can see it and I can just say, this will fit. Let's use this. You have just saved a ton of money of building a design, doing quality, doing reviews, building supply chains, managing supply chains, having issues go wrong, and you have saved. You can buy a house with that every time you decide to reuse a part as opposed to design a new part. So yeah, that makes a huge impact, and I know that because our customers see that and they tell us that. But of all the kind of things you can do, you can be smarter about choosing suppliers. You can, but when you designers are going to design, when you kind of like can stop that and say, hey, actually, we already have that part, right? And I think that makes a huge impact. When one thing that I was actually surprised by the survey was, I knew that losing veteran talent was such a concern. I didn't know how it was top of mind for pretty much everybody. So when you think about your people who have been at the company for 20, 30 years and can know, oh, well, wait, I think I remembered a project a couple of years ago that had a part like this or design like this, we should look for. When you can sort of proof yourself against what's going to happen over the next couple of years, where they're going to leave and then you're going to have a new project and there's a design that you have that you could reuse, but you're not aware of it. You can't possibly find it in your millions of files. That will make a huge impact.
Yeah, I believe it. It's interesting, those 2 points. The first one on this idea of reusing parts, I'm a marketer, so beg, borrow, steal, anything smart anyone else has ever said. But I remember when I first joined CADDi 2 years ago, one of the first major pieces that I was reading about this idea of the parts reuse paradigm was something put together by Deloitte, where they had estimated that the cost of designing a new component or part at any given point in time, when you take into consideration engineering hours, inventory, like the whole picture, was about $4,000 per part or per component. So, this is like a real quantifiable problem when it comes to parts sprawl or parts proliferation. On the other side, that idea of, how are you going to invest in people such that you don't lose the institutional knowledge contained by your senior folks. That's really the idea of senior people walking out the door is really scary for people when you haven't been able to transition individual knowledge into sort of a collective institutional form of knowledge. But I also just recently was on a customer site in Indiana. I don't think I actually have permission to use the customer's name, but we were having a conversation about the other end of the labor curve and sort of the vicious cycle created by a paradigm where turnover is really high. You don't know if the people who are joining your team are going to be with you in 2 years, and the incentive that creates to sort of disinvest from really pouring a lot of knowledge onto these new folks when they might walk out the door. And I find that really interesting too. The skilled labor question, we get hammered from both sides, right? We have very, very valuable senior folks who have information that needs to be dispersed, ready to end their careers. And we have a hesitance to fully invest all the resources needed in new people walking in the door, because you don't know if they're going to be here with you. And that investment is a loss if they walk. So it's an interesting paradigm. I want to shift over to that actually, because skilled labor was the largest constraint that came up in our survey here. So, in this world, I think it's an interesting question to ask, like, what breaks first when labor capacity is constrained, right? It could be many things. Lead times can suffer, cost, quality, the ability to innovate. That failure can probably cascade. But I'm wondering if I can go to you first, Chris, like for sort of a systems view. How do you see the impact of a lack of people in C?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's kind of two places. So first off, I'm a software developer. I've been building, software companies for a very long time. And one of the reasons why I find manufacturing so interesting is because I see manufacturing companies as analogous to software companies, right? And so instead of code, it's design, data, but it's at the end of the day, we're just trying to ship stuff. So I think quality always suffers because there's no one ever says, oh, well, we don't have enough people. Let's slow down and be less competitive. So that we can maintain our quality standards. I think, and that always suffers. But then I think also the competitiveness, you're not responding to RFQs faster or as fast. And that has massive P&L implications. So I think, yeah, companies just become less, they try to go at the same rate, but they become less competitive. And this happens in software companies all the time. And it just creates like a really bad cascading effect.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah. But I mean, it's a major concern because that's what we're seeing is that's what everyone is expecting to happen in the next few years if they can't find ways to alleviate that and be more competitive.
Yeah, part of what I think about here, right, is, well, in the way that we've had the conversation so far, there's this risk of us sounding like, we're only focused on the performance of these individual groups and doing their individual job. But manufacturing is a workflow, right? So to go from initial concept to a product in the hands of customers obviously touches a lot of different departments. It's very cross-functional discipline. And we have Philip Carpenito on the call with us. Philip, I'm going to credit you here because you're my favorite person to ever describe this. But that's the idea that winning organizations figure out how to get engineering and supply chain on the same page, or like playing in the same sandbox. So, Chris, I wanted to throw this question to you. If you had to pick one sort of cross-functional choke point that creates maybe the most cost or delay, where would you what is that for you, and where would you be looking to intervene, sort of in light of we know there are labor constraints, we know people are going to move slowly, but it's in betweens where maybe real breakages happen that nobody sees responsibility for. Like where do you focus if you want to fix that?
Yeah, I think kind of the handoff. So first off, the handoff between teams, and then I would say the handoff between engineering, procurement, like between engineering and procurement. Earlier, I talked about the sort of middle ground between sales and engineering about reuse. But I think because one of the problems that every company has today is they have different systems that different teams are using, right? They have a PLM that their engineering team is using. Maybe they have 3 PLMs, and then they've got a completely different system that their procurement team is working out of. And so when something goes to the procurement team, there's no context of anything. At the same time, the engineering team is not thinking about cost in anything they're doing, right? There could be there's tools out there that can do like should costing model, right? And when you do that, you can have a feedback loop with the engineering team of like, oh, I made this little change somewhat arbitrarily. It's not necessarily needed. And that is having a huge change in the actual cost of manufacturing this thing. So I think that's like a huge problem because the engineering team and the procurement team are basically complete silos. They don't know any of the context that the other team is working in.
Patrick, is that the same answer for you? I mean, you have this perspective of having also spent your career, with Tulip. You now are working with our partner network, right? So you get different inputs into these organizations than Chris has. So I'm wondering if you feel the same way, or if you have other places to look.
Two-part question. Yeah. First and foremost, yes. It's actually topical. I'm presenting at a sourcing conference next week exactly on this topic of how to increase communication collaboration between procurement and sourcing and engineering groups. I think that's probably, if we look at it shocks me, every organization we interact with, how prevalent of a challenge or an issue that is. And we're talking some of the biggest manufacturers out there who on paper are leaps and bounds or based on benchmarking, like looked at as some of the most productive manufacturers in the market, still struggle with these communication mechanisms. I want to piggyback a little bit on what Chris said. The siloed systems of record issue is absolutely a major driver for this, meaning engineering owns PLM and PDM, and if you're not in engineering, you likely don't have access to it. And even if you do have access to it, you don't know how to navigate it because you only go in once a month, and it's very difficult to find things and so on and so forth, right? You could say that for engineers going into ERP trying to find costing data. So that same issue exists cross-departmentally all over. I think the one thing that we often overlook is in the systems of record approach, which every big enterprise has, 20, 30, 50 systems of record today. Systems of record are good at one thing. They're good at storing the final decision. that's made when solving a problem or a challenge. It is not good at, or they are not good at capturing all of what I'll call like the trade-offs or the negotiations that are had or take place in order to reach that final decision. And so when we're to my comments earlier about reusing this past knowledge to solve very similar problems, we're building very similar yet different things. How do we leverage that knowledge without reinventing the wheel? Man, wouldn't that be great to be a fly on the wall and with the engineering group or the procurement team a month ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, when they were negotiating these different paths or routes? Alternatively, the only thing I have is, okay, they chose this direction or this design or this supplier or this price point, but I'm not sure, did they try these other things? And then it makes me have to go back and retest, retry, and waste a ton of time without knowing that these things have already been tested. And the reason why we chose this final decision or this direction was a great reason. And I don't need to go retest all of this. So that's a long-winded answer for you, Aaron, but that absolutely continues to be like the hot topic in every enterprise that I go into. Obviously, you could say the same between engineering and operations. That's always been an issue. You have an amazing design sent down to the shop floor. The experienced technician instantly knows this design is not going to work based on the tooling that they have available to them. How does he provide that feedback loop to engineering so that in future designs they don't waste their time building things or designing things in a certain way? That always presents a major choke point as well.
Yeah, that one that one makes a lot of sense to me, and always has. This is also, you're articulating, from my perspective, maybe one of the major problems with the PLM paradigm and how limited that is, in fact, by focusing purely on most recent rev and being so wholly focused on this is maybe a little zoomed in for the engineering folks, but being wholly focused on how do we get this new product across the finish line for this most recent phase, in favor of also including the entire historical parts record and all the context that exists. You certainly lose the connective tissue. So you will inevitably end up spending extra cycles to some degree along your process, reinventing the wheel, right? Like that cycle of design making it to the process engineer and them filtering back, hey guys, this isn't going to work for us. That may not even need to happen, right? And that's the value of maybe providing the context to the folks who are working on design upstream. This is also a slightly more complex version of sort of like cross-personal enablement. I also think a lot about recently the conversations we've been having with folks like Milwaukee Tool about how just getting historical data related to the material inputs of their products to their trade compliance folks is like a big uplift, a big benefit. There's no context needed there. That's straight data acquisition. We know that or somewhere down the line, we have documentation that says these products were not using nor exposed to aluminum from Southeast Asia. Ergo, they should not be hit with this tariff. Like that's it's a thing that's also incredibly difficult to do. And when you're operating in siloed systems of record and the folks who are trying to do the work don't have direct access to the data points they need. In the interest of time, I want to jump forward a little bit, get into one of the elements that came forward in here. One of the limiting factors, we've talked a little bit about obviously skilled labor. We've talked about the problems of siloed systems, making it hard to really enable folks. One of the things that screamed at us in the survey was, people have a belief that AI can help them out, but some real skepticism about their readiness to actually effectively adopt a tool. And there's a lot of fear, obviously, around investing time and resources in an approach that they're not ready for or isn't ready for the prime time. So, Chris, I want to maybe hand this to you first. Like, from an architectural standpoint, what's sort of the minimum data foundation that's required before people can actually have a conversation about using AI in an impactful way within their business? What about that?
Yeah, I mean, basically, AI is all about managing the context, like, or the data that the AI can access. And I think I think the barrier to doing something is a lot lower than it was a few years ago. So just like, really, you just have to decide what data we're gonna make available. You don't need to organize the data first like you could have in Word. Traditional, like, enterprise motions. You really can just access it, start organizing the data there like you do in CADDi, and then go from there. I think one thing of the study that was really clear is that a lot of companies have started to do pilots with AI, then they're not seeing the ROI that they want to see. I think that what's probably happening is they're not coming to these with like a clear ROI objective in mind. They're actually just saying, hey, let's just throw some AI and see what happens. And I think that it's clearly not working. I think part of that is just the hype and the sort of like fear of missing out of, oh, I see people doing stuff with AI, so I have to do something with AI as well. I think it's much more about, okay, I'm a business leader. I know how to run projects. I know how to, focus on measuring ROI improvements to the impact of my P&L, and going about it that way, which I think is also something that we do with our customers. And so that's kind of like, I think that's the second kind of hidden question is, how do companies get better about interacting with AI? And I think part of it is don't treat it as something different than everything else you're doing. Don't say, oh, we're going to do an AI thing. Say, we've got to respond to RFQs faster. We have to, reduce quality issues by picking suppliers. Let's stop picking the same supplier over and over again that keeps having the same quality issues over and over again. And I think when companies are doing that, I think it works really well. I think the other thing that I think is causing a lot of this, a lot of the data that's showing AI pilots are failing is they're not approaching it that way. They're also maybe dealing with vendors who are just kind of selling AI for the sake of selling AI. I think it's much better to go partner with somebody who has solved this exact same problem that you have for other companies like you, you can talk to those reference customers. If you're going to go, I say this a lot. If you're going to go hire someone to replace your roof, go find someone who's a roofer who has replaced roofs for other people and has a lot of reference customers. Don't treat it as a sort of different thing. So yeah, that's I see that happening a lot, but I also see our customers seeing a lot of ROI when they start with we want to achieve this ROI. Let's focus on that first, and then look at other parts of the business.
Yeah. I think I see this reflected a lot too. I get the perspective though, coming from managing the very top of our funnel and seeing what people are engaging with in terms of our website, most of our marketing material, and the greatest successes that we can lean into or that we could highlight for our customers generally start with some type of semi-generic base layer of a thing that they want to achieve, like a value they want to achieve, productivity uplift in department X. We often have pushed people towards make that sort of generic layer search and reuse type of paradigm, because it generalizes so well across departments. But then the next thing is, what's the specific workflow and the specific business outcome that they're looking to drive? And then obviously in our pilot process, we're going through and often developing very specific custom solutions to overlay on top of workflows that already exist to sort of mitigate some of the adoption risk. But that's the difference, I guess, in our go-to-market approach from somebody who's just doing like an LLM wrapper around, whatever offer they want to present. Patrick, I wonder if you can maybe give your take on that too. That I think this point is really critical, right? There's something in here about how successful companies go about adopting solutions, like AI broadly across their business, where unsuccessful people fail. I'm wondering if you can give your 2 cents.
Sure. I think one thing I always am surprised at is maybe the lack of imagination on how AI can be leveraged. And I guess I'm not surprised, because I was in that bucket not too long ago until I started working with guys like Chris, who, for those of you who don't know, Chris is building like his own digital version of himself that makes it so that he doesn't have to attend meetings anymore. He just sends his bots in his place.
I'm almost there where it can do webinars on its own.
Yeah, exactly. So if you look at it through that lens, I mean, I never would have thought that was possible 6 months ago until I saw Chris doing it. If you go into any manufacturing organization, when they talk AI, there's a 90+% chance it's in reference to some sort of co-pilot or assistant chat function that helps them, sits alongside them as they're going through their day-to-day workflow and helps assist them in some capacity. Certainly provides value, but it also is incredibly limiting in the grand scheme of how AI can and should be looked at and adopted. One of the big areas that we most often focus on is think about how much time and money companies historically have spent on data normalization. So getting these unstructured data sets, sheets of paper, information off of paper, inspections and engineering documents in a lot of cases, and getting it into a format that's digestible and can be leveraged by these agentic models. AI does all, like, you used to have to pay consulting firms hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, to take these huge data sets and migrate them over and get them in structured in a way that it becomes usable. Oh, by the way, AI allows you to do that within like hours now. So it's these unique elements in which people haven't fully accepted and adopted all the areas in which AI can help. Certainly the end user experience working alongside a co-pilot is a user experience that everyone will be used to in the future and already getting very comfortable with. But now it's time to look at how do we leverage it to solve all of the other elements to get us in prepared or leveraged in preparation for those user experiences.
Yeah, that's a great point. I'm mindful of time, and I want to leave a couple of minutes at the end to answer some of the questions that have come in through the Q&A. Maybe what I want to do is make our last question something as actionable as possible. And maybe Patrick, I'll go to you first with this. We've talked a lot about the skilled labor deficit being a major pain point. We talked a little bit very briefly about trade compliance and increasing costs being major challenges presented by somebody. I think growing consensus from the survey is AI can be a solution there. but major fears over how to right size or how to effectively scope an initial deployment. We've talked about a couple of different angles here. So I'm wondering if you had to boil it down and make a recommendation to somebody who wants value in the next 90 days out of some type of scaled, manageable deployment of an AI solution, what should their approach be? Like what do they do first? Are they seeking a partner? Are they doing an individual evaluation of a small tool? Are they doing an exhaustive deep dive into where things hurt within their business to try to find the most potent place they can fix? Like what do people do first?
Yeah, there's certainly no shortage of AI tools to solve almost any problem you can imagine. So I definitely would not start with the tool in mind. Uh, what I would recommend, and this is just goes back to my time as a consultant on the shop floor. Get your user groups together. Have an ideation workshop of all of the major challenges that you're facing. Stack rank all of those challenges and the greatest value and the least amount of effort, and use that as a starting point for some transformational projects, and then two, subsequently you build out a roadmap of all future projects you should be addressing. Once you've identified, where we should get started and where we can get the biggest bang for our buck, then go to the market and start looking at tools and which can help. A lot of times, and especially with how prevalent things are nowadays, the example I gave of just digitizing, using AI to get your documentation in a format that's digestible and usable and searchable, that does not take a long time. And there's plenty of tools out there that can help you do that. You'd be surprised at how much initial value you can get out of that within days. You're not, and you don't even have to pay very much. I mean, it's like, get some tokens, use some public LLMs. There's some really cool things that can be done on your own and make big strides that way. So yeah, start small, always. Never try to boil the ocean. Solve a very tactical problem and build upon that.
So I would be completely remiss if I didn't take this opportunity to say, if anybody is in the Atlanta area, both Chris and Patrick are going to be deep diving more of this sort of approach of how you get off the ground at the Industrial Automation and Transformation Assembly that's being put on by Millennium Alliance. I think that's March 17th and 18th. Also, if you're in the con or ag sectors, I'm going to be at Con Expo next week, and we're doing a session on Wednesday at the Bellagio. If anyone's interested in attending that, we got some really interesting speakers that are diving into some very industry specific stuff, how AI and a platform like CADDi's can be used to help with transitions over to electrification or, more effective ESG initiatives, achieving those more effectively. So we'd love to have you. I realize we're over time, so I just wanted to take a second. There's a question here that I thought was a good one from Jerry at Raytheon. And I can put this to either of you guys. What AI training programs do you recommend for beginners? Also, what kind of AI certifications are in demand in the manufacturing industry with an emphasis on additive manufacturing? That's an interesting question. Anybody got a take there?
I have my perspective, but Chris probably is more in depth. The one tool or the one skill that everyone should be focusing on and getting better at is prompt engineering. No matter what AI tools you use in the future, knowing how to best communicate them and squeeze the most value out of them is incredibly important. Chris, I'm sure you can go more in depth on specific.
Yeah, I'm kind of going to say that. So Deming said that variability is the enemy of quality. And so that is how you should think about using AI. Just certifications, I don't know. There's a lot of people selling, don't spend money. There's a lot of people selling all sorts of stuff online of like, take my course. I'm an influencer. I'll teach you how to do stuff, do stuff. But think of it like this. The wrong way to go about it is, let's say you want to be really good at preparing for a webinar. Don't say, hey, let's prepare for a webinar, talk to your chatbot, and then keep iterating and keep iterating and then keep iterating until you feel ready. Instead, use that process to say, the goal is to build a very, very large detailed prompt and a corpus of context so that I can predictably do a thing, whether it's, source apart, score a supplier, but it's not about talking to AI and iterating to end up at a result. The way you do that right is the goal is to go and build a system that does it, a prompt that does it, however you're doing it. So that's really the goal.
Yeah, well
and
said.
anytime I can quote Deming, I will do that.
Okay. Well, look, guys, thank you so much for doing this with me. And to everybody who let us run, a couple of minutes over and sticking it out with us, we really appreciate it. Answering another question in the Q&A here, we are going to be sharing a recording in our follow-up thank you email for everyone. And just a reminder, there's a lot we can do in terms of tailor and custom solutions that are AI powered for your team. So if that interests you at all, please don't hesitate to reach out to any of the three of us, and we can put you in touch with one of our solutions architects and get under the hood on how we can help. So, with that, I also just want to say thank you again, SME, for having us. It's always a pleasure, and looking forward to the next one.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Aaron, Chris, and Patrick, for the great discussion. And thanks to our attendees for your participation. And make sure you take Aaron and team up on their offer to check out that full 2026 Manufacturing Outlook study via the link they'll send in part of their follow-up materials. We certainly hope that you found today's discussion valuable and you'll join us again. Until then, remember that SME and SME Media are here to help you stay up to date on all things manufacturing. You can find links to additional webinars, podcasts, publications, and news by visiting us at advancedmanufacturing.org. Take care, everybody.